Good afternoon or good evening, wherever you may be listening to us from here on this big, beautiful planet we call Earth. This is Michael Cross here with another edition of Unlock the Door Radio here on UCY TV Productions. Hey, tonight I'm going to deal with something that it's mostly centered on male physiology, although of course it does affect women as well. And that is going to be on the subject of the decline that's being reported in male fertility in the West, in the United States, Europe, and Australia. And I think that there's something that's very important here, and it even has a connection to politics. And I will get into that in just a moment. First, I would encourage people, this is just a little plug here, I'd encourage people to subscribe. If you're listening to this later on YouTube, subscribe to my YouTube channel so you can keep up on shows even when you are not available to listen. And also, on the bottom there, you'll see a link to my official website. Please click that on. Lots of interesting articles there, mostly on psychology, but also on societal conformity and mind control. And lastly, if you like dystopian science fiction, especially one set in the era of Noah, and that's going to be related to some of the subjects I'm going to bring up tonight in regards to, for instance, biotechnology. Check out my latest novel, and that is called The Destiny of Our Past. Yes, The Destiny of Our Past, and you can check that up on Amazon if you're so inclined. Anyway, let's go ahead and get into this. And really what I'd like to bring up is two things I've noticed in articles in recent years. One is in reference to the decline in testosterone in men. And the other, of course, is the decline of fertility in men. And these are actually related to one another. And there's been a lot of stuff said lately on the internet. Some people mocking Alex Jones, a radio commentator, for his comments about chemicals changing the male species of amphibians and so forth. And a lot of people have had a lot of fun with some really crazy memes out there. Although if you just look up on Google, you type in hormones andronizing fish, or you could say a good search would be hormones from birth control pills and their effect on fish and aquatic life. There's been some speculation, pretty good actually, scientific research into this, that suggests that perhaps when we filter water, you flush the toilet, goes into the sewage treatment center. The sewage treatment centers get rid of harmful chemicals and bacteria before they return the water back to rivers and lakes and so forth. However, that treated water does not necessarily treat the estrogens from birth control pills. And so there is the theory that this is the reason why aquatic life, male aquatic life, suddenly has started to show like an androgyny taking place, in which they don't develop fully male characteristics. And there's been speculation, too, that either the water or stuff from plastics, when people microwave products that are in plastic containers, or the lining of cans and so forth, there are some chemicals, bispherols, that can actually retard testosterone in males. And there's people that feel that this could actually have some effect in regards to male fertility, as well as some people claiming it has an effect on behavior in regards to like sexual orientation. And I'm not so convinced of that. But I do think that testosterone can have a huge effect on behavior in both males and females. Okay, you'll generally find that people, for instance, there's studies that show this. You can look at your hand. Just stick your right hand on a table and look at the length of your ring finger as opposed to index finger. If your ring finger is considerably longer than your index finger, the one you point with, in case you're confused on that, it generally shows that when you were younger, you were exposed to a great deal of testosterone. And that tends to be associated in both males and females with more competitive, aggressive behavior. And most people think aggression means, oh, well, you're out there punching people out or something like that. Not necessarily. Aggression can mean that you are more competitive. You are goal-oriented. You go out and do things, and so forth. And studies have shown that women, for instance, with a longer ring finger tend to be better at sports. You know, I mean, you may have two women. One of them has a much higher level of testosterone in the developmental phase, and the other one doesn't, and they may be equal in all respects when it comes to physical abilities, but the one that's more competitive will go out and do the extra mile, so to speak, when training, and therefore will become better at whatever sport they strive for. Same with males. Males also tend to have higher sperm counts. And also studies done on like sales, like stocks, stuff like that. Men that have the longer ring finger tend to be better at that than those with smaller. And I'm not going to spend all this time talking about these studies. They'd be very fascinating. But the one thing I do want to note is that testosterone is usually associated with more competition. And there's some interesting things that would suggest that that if you feel like you're successful, you feel like you're winning and so forth, your body produces more testosterone, which means that you will become more focused on winning and more competitive. If you are subject to losing, if you, for instance, I'll give you an example. Let's say you got a couple in which a husband, we'll do this very traditionally, a husband has lost his job. And so the wife constantly is nagging him. What have you done today to try to find a new job? What are you doing right now? You should go out there and do more stuff. Oh, have you noticed the neighbor? He lost his job and had a new job in 2 weeks. You need to do more. And this kind of nagging. You know what the irony of that is? When that takes place, it actually reduces male testosterone. So in other words, he may be sitting there watching TV and a little bit depressed because he doesn't have a job. And then the wife is nagging him, which then sends his testosterone level lower, which means he has less inclination to go out and get the job. Whereas maybe if he was being encouraged, like, hey, you know, the neighbor, he was able to get a job in just a week or so when he lost his job, and you're way smarter than he is. You're much better, and blah, blah, blah. And trying to build this person up would actually increase his testosterone levels. And there's other things, of course, you can go into in reference to, I was going to mention something about the practice of sex magic and that sort of thing, but I think you get the point there, too. That can increase testosterone levels and therefore make a person more competitive, and that's true for both male and females. But I don't want to do a show on that right now. I'll see if I can invite someone who's an expert on occult practices to explain that in the near future. Anyway, so again, I'm looking at this article a couple years ago that was talking about lower birth rates amongst teenagers, unwed teenagers. And generally we can feel that's a pretty good thing. However, they were giving the reasons for this. And of course that's all speculation. You know, you got millions of teenagers out there, let's say in the United States. And each of them at the individual level has different ideas on what's appropriate, what's inappropriate, and so forth. However, they gave a few reasons why maybe the birth rate is lower amongst unwed teenagers. And then there was this one little statement that I thought was very fascinating. That perhaps there was a possibility that the fertility level was lower. Because maybe since you see more obesity in teenagers today than you saw 10, 20, and especially 30 years ago, then you may have a situation in which they're not as fertile as they used to be. Obesity is usually associated with lower fertility. Okay? It's associated statistically. Obviously, there are people that are very obese that get pregnant and people that are skinny that don't. But it's a associated variable with causing problems with hormones and therefore fertility. So, you know, this is related there too, because as I'm going to get into, obesity reduces testosterone. And especially in males, that can actually reduce fertility. So, well, let's just jump right into this and really explore this, because, you know, ultimately, as what Freud said was biology is destiny. Okay? And whereas he meant that more in the psychological sense, whether a society thrives or declines is ultimately based on fertility. Okay? At the present time, humans are mortal. All right? A successful farm, and, you know, people are going, oh, you can't compare humans to livestock. Well, actually, you can. All right? I mean, hopefully we're not being raised by some, you know, alien species that's going to eat us later. But maybe that's why they're fattening us up. But no, the thing is that you've got, let's say you're a farmer and you've got cattle, and you have another farmer, your neighbor, and he's got cattle, same number, same size of property, but his cattle are way more fertile. Okay? Way more calves get born in the spring than yours do. And this trend continues over the years to the point that at some point you're not making any money off your cattle anymore. You're not making any money off the milk. You're not making any money off the meat. And, you know, you're not going to be able to pay your taxes on your land, and you're not going to have an income really. So at some point, you're going to sell your farm or ranch to your neighbor at a pretty good price for him, because you're not making it. And that's the same for societies. Since humans are biologically mortal, the problem you have is if a society is producing more. Okay, let's say we have two societies and they're pretty equal with infrastructure. I don't want to get into economics of population on this show. But let's say you have two societies that are very similar on infrastructure. And in one society, you have an average of 3 children being born per woman. In the other society, you have an average of 1.5 children being born per woman. Okay? So in the first society, you have a little bit, statistically, you have a little bit more children being born than is necessary for replacement, whereas in the other society, you have a lot less children being born for replacement. The replacement level usually associated with around 2.3 children per woman per lifetime, although I would argue that it's probably a little bit higher if you throw in sociological variables such as people not some people choosing not to get married or just can't find the right person during their fertile years. The first society, the one that's growing with 3, is going to be in a much better position than the one that is shrinking. Okay? And if, let's just say a war breaks out in the future, the first society will probably win. Okay? When, you can say this, during the American Civil War, the Confederacy had half as many troops as the northern states, and the northern states were getting a lot of immigration from Germany and Ireland during that time period, so they had all these young men that they could just, kind of mean actually. You'd get off the boat, you had no idea what was going on, all of a sudden there's a guy there saying, hey, come on over here, we're going to sign you up for the military. They put you a blue Union uniform on you and send you off. But the thing is that the Confederate soldiers, if you look at kill ratio, were much better on the field. But the northern troops had the population. Now, there was infrastructure things associated too, railways and that sort of thing that really helped the North supply its troops. However, if the Confederacy had been the same size as the North, even with the infrastructure advantage of the North, you may have seen a totally different outcome of the war. Okay? And you can see this. Throughout the military history. Numbers usually prevail. Okay, even if the technology is a little bit better with the country that has the smaller military. If the country that's smaller has a little bit better technology, they generally do lose. They get overwhelmed, ultimately. Now, let's take a look at our society right now. And I would say, first of all, let's look at one of the studies that was done on, again, I have actually read that testosterone levels today amongst young men, let's say you're talking about guys in their 20s, look more like their grandfathers. Okay? And testosterone is supposed to decrease as a man ages. There's things guys can do about that to offset that. But generally speaking, all things being equal, it does decrease with age. But you've got a lot of young men in their 20s who I've read up to they're half as much testosterone as people maybe young men back in the 1970s had. And also these new reports that say that the sperm count on average is half of what it was back in the 70s. I mean, we are, again, I bring this up, we may be in for some interesting biotechnology developments due to this. And maybe I'll speak about that later in the show. However, what's causing this decline? I'm going to focus mostly on the testosterone. Okay? Because it is a pretty big factor in human behavior. And there were some studies done on men, same age, who were working on political campaigns, presidential political campaigns back about 8 years ago. And what they found was that as the night progressed, that election night where everyone shows up and they're like watching, okay, first state has reported who's winning, here's how many delegates. And second state, third state, so forth. And usually what happens is if you go to one of these things, there's like this tension, like, oh my gosh, is our guy going to win? And as it goes on, you suddenly realize, oops, it's not going to happen. Or, hey, it's going to happen. And what they found was that men who were McCain supporters during the presidential election, they were checking their saliva. You can check testosterone through saliva. Hate to tell you this, but this is actually associated with why people kiss. is because it's a signal to the woman's body about the testosterone of the man. You could look that up, whether that's really the variable or factor or not, I don't know. But that has been actually speculated. And the interesting thing is that the testosterone level either remains baseline or went up for the Obama men, whereas it declined during the course of the evening for the McCain men. And there's been studies done also on rugby players and so forth, in which, again, at the beginning of the game, pretty much equal overall. But then as the game progresses, the testosterone level goes down in the team when they're realizing they're going to lose. And there is actually a speculation as to why this is. If you think about this on the battlefield, if it looks like your side's going to lose, then it's an advantage, actually, evolutionarily, for you to go passive, to give up, to surrender, because you still have a chance of, not winding up dead. You could wind up, let's say during the Crusades, you were losing. You were a European crusader against Muslims, and your side is definitely going to lose. Well, I guess you could just surrender, convert to Islam, and get married, and, have a family still, pass on your genes. Whereas maybe the men who are like, I'm not going to surrender, I'm going to fight to the death. Well, you died. You didn't pass your genes on. That was the end of you. And, of course, if you were made a slave, many times you were castrated, made a slave, that didn't help you either, but at least you stood a chance. Okay? At least you stood a chance. Germans, Japanese who surrendered to the Allied forces during World War II, they generally survived, went home after the war, and started families. Now, the thing is, this idea of winning that increases your testosterone gives you this kind of ability to finish whatever you're doing, to succeed at a goal. The idea of your testosterone level going down and you going passive is sort of the way of saying, okay, we've done enough, let's surrender, let's, fight another day. Okay? And that is actually associated with testosterone levels in our modern everyday life. Like I told you about with the wife nagging, could actually lower your testosterone. And that's true too for women. Women have testosterone too. But again, I said I was going to mostly concentrate on men here. But the thing is that if someone's on your case and you feel like a loser, it makes you a loser. Your hormones become those of a loser. And that affects your brain and becomes a feedback loop. Just like if a person's always arguing and yelling, it actually reprograms the brain to always be in this kind of fight mode. Now, of course, it increases the testosterone, but then again, it could actually, maybe not. You could have a situation where you get a negative reinforcement where the person is always yelling and lashing out, but they lose every time. And that would actually decrease their testosterone and also make for a very unhappy person. But anyway, the idea, the things in our society that are decreasing testosterone, I think for one, and again, this is something that the infertility is seen throughout the world. I mean, throughout the Western world, but not in Africa, Latin America, and so forth. And you may be thinking to yourselves, well, it's because they live more natural. No, I've been to Africa. I've been to Latin America. I've been to Asia. They import a lot of food products, for those who are into the GMO stuff, GMOs and so forth. And so, diet-wise, I don't think you could totally blame this on diet in countries outside of Europe. But there is a different social structure, perhaps, that could actually come into play. And also, affluence brings with it a few other things, like obesity, which is not good either. So, don't immediately dismiss this thinking, well, this is some sort of chemical war on the West, because many of these chemicals are consumed by people outside of the West. And, of course, don't get this, people still have this notion that they don't produce things in other countries, and they do, okay? In Asia, they produce most of the products they use. And in many cases, they're using the same sorts of lining and plastics and so forth that are used in the West. So there must be other variables that are more important. So the one you could say is that we have a society where, people don't feel like they win anymore. And think about that. Everyone gets a trophy. We have a situation in which we award people and say, hey, here's for effort. Well, that takes away from actual winning. Now, you may say, but that means only a small percentage of people win. Well, that was the whole point of it, wasn't it? That only one person wins in PE, whoever makes it across the finish line first or achieves a certain goal. And that means the people that didn't make it have a chance to think, what did I not do or what did I do that did not allow me to win? And then they become winners. All right? A lot of times people on the left, they look at things like the finish line has to be fair and equal. Well, if you do that, then there are no winners and you may as well not even compete. I mean, seriously, why should you? Why should you get out there and be in a race in which, I remember this the other day. I was out running, a long run. It was really hot outside. Most people say, oh my gosh, how can you run when it's so warm? Well, I don't try to find excuses. You gotta, sometimes when it's 20, well, actually, I won't run if it is, if it's down to, in Celsius terms, if it's down to 12 minus, I won't go running. But, heat-wise, I usually find a way. But this time, I hadn't slept that night, and had a little bit of an upset stomach over something I'd eaten that I shouldn't have eaten before going to bed. Didn't sleep so well. And when I went running, oh my gosh, I came so close. I reached about 5 miles, 5 U.S. miles. And I was like, I am seriously I'm getting nauseated. And that's very rare for me. But there's been times I have actually been in a race or something back in high school, or I've just set a goal and I'm going to succeed at it. And I can actually taste blood in my throat. I feel that kind of, I am really pushing it too much. But every athlete will tell you there is a point where you just want to give up, but you refuse to do so. And after you succeed, you're ready for a stronger competition afterwards. No gain without pain. This is not what we're teaching our young people anymore. Now it's, if it's uncomfortable, don't do it. And we either teach that directly or we teach it indirectly. And this is going to have a massive impact on whether they actually feel they can win or not. And also, since our economy still favors those who do succeed, then what can happen is depression, anxiety, and so forth. When they know what they need to do to make it, but they just don't have the drive to do it. Okay, I hear parents all the time talking about this. My kids, I don't know what's wrong with them. They can't succeed at school. They can't this and this and this and this. They're always on their iPhones and computers and so forth, gaming and socializing and social media. Well, you know what? Because gaming and social media offer immediate rewards. They feel like they can be a success in the virtual world. Whereas in the real world, it takes a lot more effort, and it's not always as easy. And, you don't always win just because you do it all right. It's unpredictable. But that's the real world. That's where you have success. It's like if you, we're training kids that if you take them out into the woods and there's no food and you get stranded and you have a fishing line, they throw the hook in with the bait, wait for a few minutes, no bite, and they give up. It's like, well, I guess I'm just going to starve. Now, I talked to someone who recently, she said, very educated woman. She said, if there really was some sort of collapse of society, I would just go and sit down and die. I wouldn't fight. And I'm like, what? Now, maybe when society does collapse, or if it does, she'll have a change of heart. However, there are a lot of people that is, that you have fight, flight, or give up. And we are training a generation of give-uppers. Okay? And that's going to decrease testosterone. I sometimes wonder, and I'm going to get into this in a few minutes, I sometimes wonder if the reason why so many people become obsessed with pornography, both men and women, is because it actually does increase testosterone when someone's viewing it. It's not, I hear people say, well, it's like a drug. Well, no, it's not a drug, but there are many chemicals produced in your body that actually are feel-good chemicals. Like when you go running after you hit about 1 mile, that's when all of a sudden it's like, hey, this is fun. But maybe the first mile, it's like, oh, this is, am I going to be able to do this? And then after a mile, it's like, hey, I wonder how much time I have. I'd like to go, do a few extra miles today. Because your brain produces endorphins. And also your body is producing testosterone. So it's a very positive feedback loop. More running, less pain, more pleasure. All right? And for those that don't run, they're going, oh my gosh, you're a sadist. How could you, or a masochist, how could you say running is pleasure? It is. It really is. Those of you who run know it is. But the thing is that this is, oh my gosh, this is something we're not teaching our kids anymore. And they're going to find maybe substitutes. And maybe pornography's not just the whole idea that sex is fun and interesting and they have curiosity, but maybe they're being obsessed because it's giving them that positive biochemical feedback. And again, there's only a small percentage of people that are addicted to this stuff. I am so angry when I hear people say that just because someone looks at something, they're addicted. That's like saying, I know Charlie, he drank some wine on Christmas, and he normally doesn't drink, so he's an alcoholic now. Even though Charlie didn't actually even get drunk that day and hasn't drank for about 3 months. Oh, he's an alcoholic because he used it. That's just stupid. So anyway, on with a few things. First of all, let's just go through some of these things here that I think is decreasing testosterone in the West. Okay, first is obesity. Okay, I've already talked about the idea that physical activity increases your testosterone level. Okay, when your body's repairing itself after exercise, it's producing testosterone. You may feel tired, but it's building your body. All right? So exercise increases testosterone levels. Obesity, on the other hand, decreases testosterone levels, particularly in men. Fat you get on your stomach, that belly fat, a lot of guys joke about it. Their six-pack, so to speak, and I'm not talking about the six-pack as in flat stomach, but the beer belly aspect of the six-pack. And they'll pat it and take a pride in it. Well, I hate to say this, but that fat is associated with producing chemicals that offset testosterone. It is. And so obesity can affect both male and female fertility, but when it comes to just testosterone in and of itself, it's a huge impact on men. And the problem with that then is if if you're a guy and you are gaining weight and you're just feeling sluggish and like, oh my gosh, I can't fit into my clothes, you're sitting there watching TV, huge waste of time. TV is the biggest time killer in existence right now. But your body's going, oh, I'm tired. Well, that's because you're not producing testosterone. You're producing other chemicals that's offsetting it that actually slow you down. Because in reality, humans do have a biological reason to relax. Because food was never as plentiful as it is today. All right? So the idea that you would eat and then go out and exercise or do something like that would be foolish. It'd be like, well, my gosh, we just barely have enough food for the winter and you're out there jogging. You're wasting your food. Well, in times past, that would be true. Slowing down for the winter would be a good idea. But now, we can slow down all the time because we have that food. And so, really, obesity, getting yourself in shape is probably, if society did it in general, if everyone was exercising at the same levels that they did back in the late 70s up until the late 80s, if our exercise levels were the same, I think you would see an increase in testosterone amongst men, especially, and you would also see probably an increase in the fertility. All right, so that's a biggie right there. Lifestyle, obesity, and it seems to be getting actually worse society, when you get people saying, well, fat is a feminist issue and how dare you question someone, you're fat shaming. I've even seen on some websites where a woman is claiming that she went to a doctor and the doctor said she should lose weight or she's going to develop diabetes, type 2 diabetes, and she's saying that she's asking what can she do? Can she sue her doctor for that advice? Because he was fat shaming her. I mean, this is not a very good thing when we get into a society that's actually going to start saying that obesity is in some way some sort of expression of equality or something. No, it's not. It is a public health issue as much as smoking or drinking too much would be. But obesity is something that does decrease testosterone. Oh, by the way, and think about this though. If you're talking about compliance of a society, you ever wonder what it would be, why maybe people just are apathetic nowadays? Remember what I said about the study that was done on the voters? That as the testosterone goes down, they're going to become a little bit more passive as a result of the rugby players, that sort of thing. Maybe we're seeing a lot of passivity in our political structure today because of a decrease in testosterone. Think about that for a moment. I hear people say, would people have put up with such and such if this would have happened 30 years ago when they talk about politics? The answer is, I don't think so. So I would say no. Could one of the reasons be a decrease in the overall testosterone rate in the population? Think about that for a moment. And then you think, well, maybe there's a conspiracy there, get everyone overweight, so A, you depopulate, and B, you have a more passive population. Who knows? Anyway, I said the exercise thing. And that's related to stress. Stress decreases testosterone. It also decreases fertility. But exercise increases testosterone, and it actually decreases stress. If you've got a woman, two women have the same job. One of them, and let's say it's a very high stress job, one of them follows a regular exercise program and the other one doesn't. The one that follows the regular exercise program will actually be able to alleviate some of that stress, if not most of it, when she gets off work through going out there and doing something. The other one goes home and is still stressed. Still like, oh my gosh, how am I going to get this through this period right now? We're having to do this and this and this and this and this, and I just can't keep up. well, then that creates, that negative feedback loop in which you convince yourself that you can't win. And therefore, you're conditioned to lose and to fall behind. So exercise actually would be, or if people would exercise more, they would be much better at whatever they do. Plus, they would have their hormones back in balance. Okay, let's go get controversial here. Goes back to what I was saying about the pornography. It has been shown that both men and women, whether they're engaging in frequent sex or they're even just thinking about sex, their testosterone levels go up. All right, I've heard, I don't know where I read this, so I'm not going to say, oh, this is a definitive proof, but I did read somewhere that fertility clinics were encouraging men that before they come in and donate sperm, that maybe they should look at a dirty movie or something first. And then, get in the car, drive down to the fertility clinic, and help the next generation of children. And that may just have some validity to it. That, they're thinking about sex, that boost their testosterone, get some more, and then they can actually produce more volume of sperm when they go in and donate. I know some people are cringing right now, but this is actually a biological thing. I mean, it's probably something that's going to become more and more and more a norm if things don't turn around, that men who do withstand the rigors of today's society and can still be fertile and produce sperm will be called upon by lesbians, single women, and married women whose husbands can't survive the rigors of today's modern society when it comes to reproduction abilities. These kind of guys are going to be in way more demand in the future. And this could lead to more acceptance of biotechnology. Just like, again, I described this in my book, The Destiny of Our Past. That, eventually reproduction will be something that involves technology at all times. Okay? And it'll become more and more acceptable. Then we'll get into bioengineering. Because people will be like, oh, well, that's just an easy step. Right now, they're like, do I want my kids to be genetically enhanced? And most would probably be like, it sounds good, but it's kind of creepy. But, get a point where going to the fertility clinic is how you have kids. Then it's not such a big step to the next stage. So anyway, thinking about sex or doing more sex increases testosterone. And probably helps in fertility. Another thing, I'm out on the porch right now. You might hear this nice breeze, summer breeze. Vitamin D. That's right, sunlight. And I saw some studies done in Scandinavia in which they said that children generally get born 9 months after the sun starts returning in the spring. And believe me, in Scandinavia, we're not talking about like the Pacific Northwest. Some cities in Sweden and Norway only get 4 hours of daylight during the winter. And that's filtered sun, okay? Filtered winter sun. Vitamin D levels plummet. You have a lot of people get very depressed. Many go in and sit under lights, natural lights, during the winter to offset what they call seasonal affective disorder. And that's, a lot of other people just take vitamin D supplements and in order to offset that and be able to. And vitamin D, of course, is associated with testosterone and fertility and these things. But, summer months come. I mean, the sun starts coming back out. 9 months later, 10 months later, babies start getting born. Okay? It is something, we are affected by sunlight. And now it's found that, not getting enough sunlight can actually contribute to cancer. So, it's moderation in all things, just like the Mormons have that thing about the word of wisdom. All things in moderation. And sunlight, too much sunlight, that's not going to be good for you when it comes to your aging of your skin as well as skin cancer. Not enough sunlight, it poses other risk and actually has been associated with other cancers. And, of course, these things, a decrease in testosterone, fertility, and that sort of thing. But I would suggest people look that up and check it out. It's quite interesting, actually, that just vitamin D could be something that could affect these kinds of things. In the old days, it wasn't such a big issue. Because you worked out in the field. But nowadays, people work in offices. They work in places where if you were a vampire, you'd be under no threat whatsoever of dying by getting hit with a ray of sunlight, because you don't get rays of sunlight. So I encourage people to look into that whole vitamin D thing and sunlight and so forth. Now, sleep. Again, we have a society in which sleep disorders are on the rise, and a lot of that has to do with stress. It also has to do with the fact that we have constant stimulation. Okay, anyone who has teenagers knows this. Oh my gosh, just a few years ago, MSN Messenger was the problem, because they would be on. It's Messenger, right? You forget after just a few years, things get, seems like ancient history. Where you get on and type in something, then your friend would type a response and back and forth, and they'd have like a laptop or a regular stationary computer, and you'd be like, don't you have school tomorrow? And it's like midnight. And they're like, yeah, Dad, don't worry, I'll get off right away. And no, they don't get off right away, because they want to hear what their friends are doing. It only takes one friend to still be up, and, they're wanting to stay in there. They don't want to be like, okay, I got to go to bed now. That's kind of uncool to be the one that says you got to go to bed. So that was bad enough, but now with the iPhones and so forth, smartphones, you can sit there and lay in the bed, and it's just constant stimulation. And then they put the phone down next to you, and then, you're almost asleep, and suddenly, beep, oh, one of my friends is trying to get in touch. And you respond. You put the phone down. 10 minutes later, they respond again. And it's not just teenagers, okay? There's plenty of people that are of all ages that are caught up in this. That's a problem. That's a problem that has to, be alleviated, because, again, it is contributing to a decrease in natural hormones. Now, diet, I'm not one of these strict people on diets. I'm not one of these people. It's like, oh my gosh, we got to eat this, natural this, and all this kind of stuff. Although, you got to watch the intake of calories, and also you got to look at your nutrition that you're getting or not getting. However, I'll point this out. If we're going to look at the 70s as a baseline, as opposed to today, and again, I'm not going to talk about GMOs in reference to this, but let's say that we're looking at the 70s and today. Really, there isn't. People were eating just as much fat in the 70s as they are today. All right? And they still stayed in shape. A difference is movement and some of these other things I've talked about. And it's actually, ironically, if you do go on some sort of vegan type diet, and, you're hardly getting any fat or anything, that can actually decrease your testosterone and other chemicals that your body produces. Again, you can look into this yourselves, because I'm not going to give any dietary advice here or anything. But I just, I like to stay exercising and keeping in shape and so forth. But I'm not one of those people that's like, oh, I can't eat this. No, I just think that if we take a look at the fact that in the 1970s, people were not all a bunch of organic, veganish type people, and yet, testosterone levels were higher, fertility was higher, obesity was much lower, people were less stressed. Okay? So, but diet is important. You need to be getting good nutrition, and also not overnutrition, which ultimately spells into undernutrition, if you get my point. If you're getting twice as many calories as you need, it actually makes you as sick as if you're being malnourished. So you gotta have that moderation in all things. Now, the other thing I'd point out earlier, win. Or at the very least, act like a winner. That increase, just the mere fact, I've heard this. If you take up more space, and this is true for men and women, it's none of that, thing sometimes feminists complain about, manspreading or something like that. And at the same time, they'll say, well, this is not meant to, if the person is obese. And you're like, okay, well, you just make this you guys just make this up as you go along, right? Okay, I get the point. However, if you're like all bundled up, you fold your arms, you're just crouched when you talk to someone, as opposed to, being kind of spread out with your arm out and, just taking up more space, that's actually been associated with increasing your testosterone. Males and females both. Because like in the animal kingdom, you make yourself look like you have more volume in order to scare off a predator. And that takes some courage. I've seen mice stand up to cats, and by doing that, stand up on their back legs and then just kind of spread themselves out. Makes it look like they're more vulnerable, but at the same time, the cat, in their mind, because it's not a very big brain, now some cat lovers are going to be really upset with that, but it's true, can interpret that as, oops, it's a bigger prey. I got to watch out. Maybe I should leave this one alone. So, I think all animals do that. Humans are no exception. You go into a job interview and you're all like, closed in. The boss gets the idea you're vulnerable. If the boss is trying to hire someone who's going to be dynamic and strong, then you're making yourself weak in that respect. Versus if you're taking up a little bit more space and you're being more confident, well, it's going to make you more confident. It's going to give you more of the hormones that make you confident. So it's the positive feedback loop. So you can look that one up as well. And even thinking you're a winner. Okay, even in your mind, you may not be winning. You may be losing. You go out there, you're a student in PE, and you're just not as fast or as strong as the other students. But you're thinking to yourself, but you know what? I'm better at this than they are. That'll increase your testosterone. Okay? Which can lead to you becoming faster and stronger. So that's another one you should look into. Our society is, again, I'm going to go back to this, our society is taking away a lot of the opportunities for people to be winners, to feel like winners. Our television shows put us down. We watch TV shows that mock our particular race or ethnicity or economic status, and it's true for every race, ethnicity, and economic status. And people think, well, it's funny. I can laugh at that because it's sort of true about my this or this or this. But at the same time, the mere fact you're being mocked makes you feel lower. Okay? You may get a laugh out of, look at that father. His wife just owns him all the time. He's so stupid, and you laugh at it. But at the same time, you're going to start imitating that behavior, that the negative stereotype. is portraying. And you're going to, become kind of weak and so forth. So the, and TV presenting women, many ways, being anxious and neurotic in programs. Again, it's mocking you. You're being mocked, especially in reality shows where they choose people based on certain criteria and who they're going to reach and what message will go out. It's fake. But it also is having an effect on your mentality and your psyche. Think about if you were a writer for a show, how you would present people around you in your race, religion, ethnicity, economic status, or so forth, or gender. Would you do it the way they do it on TV? Of course you wouldn't. So therefore, our society is, in a way, constantly telling us we're losers. The TV box. You're a loser. Movies. You're a loser. You're not pretty enough. You're not rich enough. You're a loser. That is the message. If that's the message, turn it off. Alright? Or watch something that at least will be more conducive towards a winning character. And there are shows like that. I don't think they're the majority, but they are there. Finally, alcohol and cigarettes. Give them, this is negative. These are things that are not good for you. Alright? They affect the health of your body, so therefore they must have an effect on your hormonal levels. So, this is something that you should reevaluate. And I don't have to go into detail about this. You've heard it over and over and over and over and over again. And think about it. When someone tries to give up cigarettes and they're unable to, and then they try again, they're unable to, this is creating a feedback loop as well. It's telling them, you're a loser, you're weak, you better grab a cigarette. Okay? You got to get into a winning mentality. Find something you do win in, and then project that onto the bad habits you have in order to get rid of it. Anyway, we're running out of time here. So I hope this has been informative in some respects. But, look into these things. Don't take my word for anything I have said. Look it up yourself. And see what's really out there and how it's affecting physiology of people today. Anyway, take care and catch you next week on another edition of Unlock the Door Radio here on UCY TV Productions.